Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is John. Thanks for checking out the channel. It's been about a week since I put out a video. Spent some time in Nashville. Love Nashville, one of my favorite smaller cities to go to here in the States. And just a fun place to just go hang out, right? Like if you love live music, Nashville can't be beat. Card-wise, I got a few things to share with you guys. Recently have been buying or focusing a little bit more on the Goldin auctions that take place every Thursday. And I think I've purchased half a dozen cards at this point from them, which isn't a lot, right? But the first couple of purchases were just to get familiar with Goldin, and I'm kind of looking at doing some things with Goldin, or using the PSA vault specifically, and just having my purchases go from Goldin or remain in the PSA vault if that's where Goldin has the cards today, since Goldin is a part of PSA at this point. But trying to capitalize on the reduced shipping that Goldin and the PSA vault provide you by storing cards there. The concern there is this channel, right? Like if I'm buying cards and if I'm not necessarily shipping things to me in, a couple month period of time, then there's not a lot to necessarily share unless I, choose to share more of a digital aspect of things on how I'm purchasing or what I'm sending to the vault. That said, I'm trying to use Goldin more for my personal collection. At this point, all my focus has been only for the personal collection as far as Goldin is concerned. And to be totally honest, that's pretty much the only things that I'm doing on eBay right now from the purchases on eBay. They're also only personal collection type stuff. So there are things that I do want to send to myself, of course, because they're for my PC, where things on COMC specifically, and maybe Goldin in the future, are going to be more kind of flipping opportunities or looking at flipping opportunities. Since I mentioned COMC, I think I'm going to do a 3-month recap here at the end of the month. So if you're interested in seeing that video, make sure that you're following along, because I started my COMC store or portfolio in January, mid-January, and I think this video that I'd like to do, I have an idea of really taking you guys behind the curtain and sharing kind of everything that I've invested, kind of some of the strategies that I've exploring from a COMC perspective, share statistics, sales rates, margin, kind of everything that I've done, from how I'm tracking the information, how I'm identifying what I want to sell, which to me, there's no magic there. It's I'm actually probably hurting myself as far as what I'm choosing to flip. But I'm thinking about doing that video, so I may be looking to put some of that together here soon. And then the Nashville cards. So it was in Nashville. I actually didn't know that there was a card show taking place the weekend that we were showing up. So I'm sitting at the hotel on Wednesday night, and I just happened to Google Nashville Card Show. Just kind of dumb luck that the week that we needed to be there was there for my wife's work. I just kind of tagged along just because I love going to Nashville. And yeah, there was a fairly large card show there. I didn't know until that Wednesday, and I didn't carve out really any time to spend there. I did show up at the start of the show, which was Friday at noon, and I only had about an hour and a half to really spend at the show. And I would say, first of all, the show was A quality. Like if you were to put a letter grade to it, it was an A, right? Large show, certainly larger than what we have here in the Denver marketplace. Tons of vintage, which, for folks that don't know this, vintage is easier to get west of the Mississippi. or excuse me, east of the Mississippi. You know, it's just the way how America evolved and where those cards are. And I get modern day e-commerce, blah, 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 blah. There's plenty of vintage cards in California and throughout the Midwest, but there is a substantial amount of dealers that sell vintage west of the Mississippi. And I've got nothing to back that up with outside of just, 40 years experience doing sports cards. But anytime you can go to a show west of the Mississippi, especially if you're from, the Intermountain West or kind of the Midwest, you're going to find it's a treat oftentimes because you'll see tens and tens of dealers, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that is a lot, that focus on nothing but vintage, right? Like that's all that they bring. And so you'll see things like early, Mickey Mantles and Willie Mays. And I will say there wasn't a ton of pre-war. There wasn't a ton of pre-war that I noticed, but some pre-war, but generally I'd say post-war, early post-war, kind of through the 60s, so 48 to 60, tons of that sort of stuff. I also had very limited cash with me because, again, I wasn't planning on going. I don't carry a debit card with me. My wife was in a conference. She has her debit card with her. Driving to the show, which I gave myself about an hour's advance notice before I determined that I had enough time to at least go spend an hour at the show. I was searching for a Chase Bank on the way, and there wasn't one, so I had like $60-70 in my pocket, and it's what it was, or I think it was like $60. So $5 to park, which sucked. $5, which because it's pointless. They were just looking for extra income, I'm sure. And then $5 for entrance in the show, which I'm fine paying. The parking is just kind of silly, quite honestly, because there's plenty of parking in the general area. I was very fortunate because the vintage dealers were kind of not all of them, but there was a good chunk of vintage dealers which were all kind of commingled together. And I wish I would have had more time to spend at the show. Unfortunately, I didn't. I need to get a few cards from the show. But let's go ahead and flip over the camera. We'll talk more about the show, and we'll talk a little bit more about some Goldin Auction things that I want to look at in the future. But let's go ahead and I'm sure you guys would rather see the cards instead of me. So let's flip around the camera. All right, 3 stands out. I have 3 graded cards, all purchases from Goldin. I do have baseball in the Nashville lot that I'll share with you guys in a minute, but this is football and basketball. First card I will share with you guys is a 1986 Fleer Isaiah Thomas rookie card in a PSA 8. If you guys have been following the channel for some time, you've seen some recent pickups from this set, rookie card set. This would be my favorite NBA rookie card set ever. This is the generation of basketball that I grew up watching and falling in love with the sport of basketball, watching the Isaiah Thomases and the Magics and Birds and Kareems at the end of his career, and the Jordans and Malones and Stocktons and Ewings and David Robinsons and so on and so forth. I think this is one of the greatest sets, if not the greatest basketball set of all time, specifically related to cards. I do have, and I've mentioned this before, I do have all of these cards in raw condition. I also have a PSA 7 Michael Jordan. I will be looking to upgrade into a PSA 8 Michael Jordan at some point. But I'm trying to pick up all of the other rookie cards right now in PSA 8 form in the new Lighthouse PSA holders. Now that prices have come down following some of the spike we've seen with the pandemic. Second card that I purchased the same week on Goldin, which was not the last auction, but the auction before, was this 1975 Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw is a guy that I PC. Steelers are kind of my team, so this was the final 1970s card that I needed for my Terry Bradshaw 70s or decade run. So it's only a PSA 5, which I'm fine with. Got this card for like $13. By the way, I think I was 85. want to say 85 for the Isaiah Thomas, which was about $15 lower than eBay comps. The Terry Bradshaw was like $13, and this would also include the buyer's premium. But I'm somewhere in that ballpark range, right around $13 for the Terry Bradshaw. So you can't buy the card in mid-tier grade and have it graded for this price. So this was an easy one to pull the trigger on. Plus, it finished my decade's run. And then in last week's auction, Goldin Auctions, there were 2 cards that I purchased. One of them was in the PSA vault and literally just arrived moments ago. The other one hopefully is in the mail coming, I think USPS. Because if they come from the vault, if you guys aren't aware, they come from the PSA vault, they are sent FedEx, and you have to sign for them, which is kind of a pain in the butt. But if they don't come from the vault, then they go USPS. And so I'm hoping that other card is either showing today or tomorrow. But Julius Erving is also another person that I am trying to get the full decades run. I think his rookie card was 72. And I'm trying to go 72 through 81. So this is the last card in that run. The star cards that came out in the early 80s, I haven't done a lot with those cards just because I don't consider myself an expert. I own one star card, and that is the John Stockton rookie card, or XRC. So because I just don't have a ton of knowledge in those cards related to counterfeits, and I know that the Star brand has had a reputation with QVC days and the owners potentially printing cards many years after the original releases, I probably am going to stop with the 1981. But I may change my mind in the future now that PSA is grading them above and beyond what BGS is graded. I'd really like to see SGC grade them, and that may be the point where I really jump into purchasing more of them. But this is, I still think I'm missing, I think it's a 75 and maybe the 76 in the Dr. J's. So I haven't completed that run yet, but this is just on the road to completing that run. If I didn't mention it, this is a PSA 7 on this 1981. Paid about $20 for it, which is funny because during the Goldin auction, there was a PSA 6 that basically sold for the same price as the PSA 7. So that's where Goldin is. You really got to pay attention to what you're buying on it. You can find some vintage at better prices, but I don't know that it's as savvy a buyer. And I think that the buying process with the extended bidding kind of helps generate, the buying process being a little wonky. So about $20 for that after the buyer's premium. Pretty happy to add that one. Let's talk about the Nashville cards. I'm going to be fairly brief. 3 buyers or 3 dealers that I bought cards from. Before I do, I will share that I spent an hour and a half total. To get in the show, it was about $5 for parking, which was comical. But $10 to get in. I wasn't planning on going to the show until about an hour before the show opened. It opened at noon on Fridays. I was sitting at a place having breakfast about 11 o'clock in the morning and decided my wife had told me that she needed to be picked up at a certain point. And based upon where I was and how long it was going to take me to get back and forth, I knew that I'd have about an hour, hour and a half. That's the first thing. I wish I would have had 8 hours. I could have spent easily 8 hours at the show and been probably wanting more after that, but only had an hour and a half. I was fortunate because a lot of the vintage dealers seemed to be commingled together, which was nice. Some of those dealers had prices that were above comps, and I did throw out a couple of offers on a couple of higher dollar cards from some guys taking PayPal, and basically got told no. And I, by the way, they were eBay comps that I was trying to buy the cards at. And the dealers basically turned down the opportunity to move the card. I would say both of those dealers were anywhere between 20 and 30% high on everything that they had listed for sale. I would say from a vintage perspective, because I didn't get a chance to really do a deep dive on the non-vintage dealers from the rest of the show. So I probably only seen about 20% of the dealers there, like spent time with 20% of the dealers there. Half of the dealers, half the vintage dealers didn't have prices marked. I'd say that was probably pretty much the standard across the show. It's a pet peeve of mine. If you're going to show up to a show, have your stuff priced, right? Me wasting time to try and find comps and then negotiate based upon comps. When you've got a limited amount of time, it's a little bit annoying. But let's show you a couple of cards instead of just rambling. The first lot is also football. A guy had a value box. I started thumbing through them. He had a bunch of kind of lower condition cards out. And then he had a box of better condition cards, but cheaper prices. When I was looking at a couple of his other cards, he had a raw Terry Bradshaw rookie, which is a card I own graded. But this was a good looking card, generally speaking. And he threw out a fairly aggressive, fair price, which it made me stop and think, do I want to buy the card? I opted not to because it looked like it may have been cut funny. And I certainly wouldn't call it trimmed. I wouldn't want to accuse somebody of trimming it, but the card was almost cut on one of the sides, really funky. So even though it was a really fair price, I opted not to. These cards, when I was thumbing through the box, he said, "I'll sell you anything in the box for $2 a card." And so there was a bunch of cards that I thought about buying. It was basically 70s basketball, and a lot of those cards you can pick up on COMC and other places for $2 and $3. So I didn't see a ton of value, but I did find this Lawrence Taylor rookie card. I don't even know what that goes for, but for $2 I was a buyer. I think the Bruce Smith only sells for $4 or $5 on COMC, but for $2 I was a buyer. And I'm pretty sure this is a 79 Walter Payton, which I already owned in very similar sort of condition, but this one's clean. It's not perfect, but it's clean. And for $2, that was an easy buy. I think that card probably sells for about $10 on COMC. The next buyer, the next seller also had a value box. $5 a card. 1968 Carl Yastrzemski. $5. Probably the best condition of these three cards. This was an easy buy. The Killebrew was also $5, 1968. A little OC top to bottom, or pretty aggressively OC top to bottom. But other than that, pretty clean card. Pretty easy buy for that one for me. And then this 62? Yeah, 62, because 61's the ugly cards that I don't like. The 62, I've always been a fan of these cards, and I know this is not a lot of people's favorite year for tops. But these cards are very condition sensitive. So when you can find one that's in pretty good shape, and yeah, there's some whiting on the corners. I'm not saying that this is perfect, and it's certainly OC, but Cepeda is not the most highest selling Hall of Famer of all time, but for $5, this seemed like an easy purchase for $5. And then the final card. This dealer had his cards, and a bunch of cards, and I really wish I could have spent more time with this dealer going through his value box, but I had about 5 minutes left in my day before I needed to go head towards where my wife was at to go get her picked up. And this card and a 1972 Willie Mays were the first two cards that I found in this guy's value box, and pulled them to the side. Here's the challenge. I had about $22 cash left in my pocket. And the dealer came back. He actually wanted $45 for this card. And I misunderstood how he had the cards, because if there was a dot on the price tag, he wanted full price. If there wasn't a dot, then he was willing to go to half price. Comps on this card in raw condition for similar, because as I mentioned, this isn't perfect. It's certainly OC. But comps were closer to about $35. So I had mentioned, well, you want 45. He's like, no, I want full price for that. And I was like, okay, well, comps are closer to 35. And he's like, give me 25. And I said, hey, I got $22 cash. He's like, perfect. Settled for that. Pretty happy to get this one for $22. I do want to eventually upgrade into a graded version of this card, but I don't own the Seaver Rookie. But I'm also a fan of the Gold Cup cards, as many collectors are. And for $22, this was an easy purchase. I did not get the Willie Mays because I knew I only had $22 cash on me, and if he was going to be higher on this card than what I had in my pocket, I would have picked up the Willie Mays, which he wanted $15 for. Really do regret not picking up the Willie Mays for $15, by the way. But you know, I didn't have time to deal with buying, doing PayPal and the whole thing, and I'm not even sure that the dealer was accepting PayPal. So for the last $22 that was in my pocket, with the limited cash that I took with me, I picked up this Seaver, and I'm super happy to add it to my collection. That said, that's what we got. I didn't mean the video to be a 15-minute video, but it's going to be, I think, over 15 minutes. So let's go ahead and wrap it up there. If you guys kind of like the journey I'm on, you guys want to be a part of the team, feel free to subscribe and follow along. If you guys like this type of content, hit the thumbs up, and we will just chat with you guys in the next one.